Baby, I've been searching like everybody else. Can't say nothing different about myself. Sometimes I'm an angel and sometimes I'm cruel. And when it comes to love, I'm just another fool. Yes, I'll climb a mountain.
My friend Al Caterino used to come to my gigs at a local wine bar. There's an enormous circular fire pit in the center of their secluded outdoor patio, and I would play off to the side, still well positioned to watch people interacting in the firelight. At the end of the gig, I'd hand my guitar to Al, and he'd serenade customers for another hour or so, while I packed up all the performance paraphernalia. Over time, this became the routine, and I suspect some people were coming to the gig to be a part of the Al Caterino after-show show. He loved to take requests, and as is well known, he could play almost anything anyone would ask for. He was a human jukebox for a stream of swooning women requesting romantic ballads, and he loved the attention. One night I'd finished cleaning up and sat down with a few remaining customers, sipping their Chardonnay and listening to Al. He began a familiar tune, and as he played, he leaned over to me and explained how the lyric of the song upset him, because he always assumed that he would die before his wife did. Now, at that point, I didn't really know that much about Al Caterino. I didn't know his wife and one of his daughters had died not too long before that, and I didn't know the lyric of the song he was about to sing. So I just listened.
Then when I leave this earth, I'll be with the angels standing. I'll be out there waiting for my true companion, just for my true companion.
I had to turn my face away to wipe a tear. Yet, he played it without a skip of emotion or a crack in his voice. Then Al got sick. It was February 2020, just before the pandemic was acknowledged and the initial countrywide coronavirus lockdown was declared. He had fever and a cough and a moderately severe lung infection that kept him from attending the wine bar gig. I suspect that if he'd gone to the hospital at that time, he would have been admitted and diagnosed as having an atypical pneumonia of undetermined infectious etiology. He came close to a hospital visit, but he finally recovered, having resisted the coronavirus panic, which by that time was in full gear. I think he got a kick out of my incessant claim that I'd already been exposed to the bloody infection through my guitar sharing and examinations of Wuhan Al. Though the lockdowns wiped out the fireplace gig, eventually we managed to get back to what had become our regular weekly get-togethers for guitar lessons and his stories about past musical escapades. This New Jersey guy had played the full gamut of gigs. He played Hava Nagila at bar mitzvahs in Brooklyn and jazz at the Playboy Club in Manhattan. Our sessions would always include a bit of music theory, commentary on chord name conventions, key change logic, musical modes nomenclature, and other such impenetrable arcane music-related esoterica. The weekly sessions would extend through mealtime and lead into a conversation about health and diet theory, which was my contribution. Then we'd head out on a carnivore diet expedition, just a couple of cavemen out hunting for meat. We must have eaten at a dozen different steak restaurants. We drove south to Queen Creek to hear his friend Billy play and have steak. We drove north to Black Canyon City to hear his friend Vern play and have steak. He wanted to advertise in his local library his availability to provide guitar lessons for adults, so I made him a sign that read, "Guitar lessons will teach for sirloin." It was a lot of fun. I even wrote a song for him, making fun of his charming infatuation with the minor seventh flat 5 chord. Very funny, very eclectic. Then, over Christmas, while his son was visiting from North Carolina, he got sick again. He fainted at home, falling dramatically against a glass patio door, and in a dramatic scene, Al was picked up by paramedics and whisked away to a local emergency room. A brand new facility, very inviting from the outside. But the hospital staff wouldn't allow his son or his daughter, or even me, to be with him to provide history to the staff in the emergency room. They wouldn't even let us wait inside in the waiting room. "It's not safe, patients only," they said. "We're just complying with the CDC guidelines," they said. They made us stand outside the building in the cold December night air, while just inside the emergency entrance, he was texting that a nurse told him he was going to die. Have you ever been presented with routine resuscitation preference forms when you're sick? They were presented to him on a clipboard and a packet of papers without explanation, as usual. "These need to be signed," she said. "Do you want to be intubated? Do you want to have chest compressions? Who has power of attorney? So that if you're debilitated in the intensive care unit, we can get permission to turn off the ventilator and let you die." The callousness of people cannot be overestimated. They admitted him after documenting coronavirus present, and 2 days later, after seeing increasing oxygen requirements, they transferred him to another hospital for higher level treatment. In the new hospital, he was still not permitted to see his son or his daughter. By that time, he'd been isolated from his family for a full week over Christmas. He was locked in a closed room, unable to get out of bed, with noisy respiratory therapy equipment and unattended monitor alarms preventing a good therapeutic night's sleep. He was being visited only by medical personnel in gas masks. You know, the ones with the bulbous filters in front and either side. It was like a scene out of Chernobyl, and the New Year's Eve anniversary of his wife's death was approaching. We knew it was going to be hard. He'd been texting his daughter, "I'm going to die," and "I'm so depressed." There was further deterioration over the week, and he was moved into the intensive care unit, where an angel nurse explained the availability of communication with the outside world via iPad. Finally. This was immensely helpful. Unfortunately, in the intensive care unit, he was again presented with a "do not resuscitate" conversation and paperwork to sign, and a definitive decision about the ventilator was made. He would not have it. Given that he refused the treatment his transfer to the intensive care unit was intended to provide, they abruptly untransferred him and moved him back out to the isolation ward. The closed rooms, the unattended monitor alarms, the staff in gas masks. On New Year's Eve, I went into the hospital and up to the isolation ward and visited him in his room for a few hours. He was thin. "I'm so depressed," he told me. He looked at me over his oxygen mask. "Bruce, you're a good friend." I held his hand as his shoulders shuddered against his pillow, trying to suppress tears. He was sleeping when I was escorted out of the hospital by security. Over the next few days, there seemed to be stabilization and very gradual improvement in his oxygen levels. The community of Al Caterino fans rallied. A friend, a Karen Carpenter sound-alike he'd recently recorded, organized a get-well card drop-off for the music community at his regular live music venue, and she personally delivered dozens of cards to the hospital lobby. She wasn't allowed to visit him, and the iPad wasn't offered. Some days later, she brought in a guitar a friend of his had donated to cheer him up and combat the anonymity, but this too had to be dropped off in the hospital lobby. "No visits," no iPad. It had been almost 3 weeks without an in-person visit by family when his doctor called his daughter Jill to tell her, Al has given up. The doctor told Jill that he thought Al was going to die that day. Now, this was shocking news. We thought he was doing better. His oxygen level had been slowly improving. There were no answers provided, and a million questions went unasked. The idea of Al Caterino dying in the hospital with no family around was unthinkable, and we had to negotiate a special scheme for his kids to see him before he died. The hospital would have to transfer him to hospice, and to do that, the hospital had to consent to withdrawing treatment and letting him die despite having not seen him for weeks. An enormous ethical dilemma. But in desperation, the decision was made and transfer was arranged. I waited at the end-of-life center for hours with Al's son and daughter before they finally moved him over in the middle of the night. When the transport team arrived, Al was breathing, but he was not there. 12 hours later, the breathing stopped. A week later, I showed up early at the mortuary to participate in the funeral service. Al's daughter had asked me to play a song on the guitar that Al had told her he enjoyed. An old Paul Simon song called American Tune. The melody is lifted from a traditional Catholic hymn, On Sacred Head Now Wounded. A hymn about the death of Christ. American Tune is about the difficulties Americans find themselves facing. So many layers of irony, I wasn't sure I'd get through it. After the service, Al's daughter Jill handed me a gift she said Al had asked her to deliver. It seemed strange to receive some kind of bequest at the memorial service. In the package was a bottle of cologne. I didn't really understand it. A confusing message. Perhaps he intended it to help me meet the right woman, as we'd so often discussed. Certainly, we'd never talked about fragrance before. The package read, Modern by Banana Republic. Of course, there was no card. When I got home, I opened the package and smelled it. Oh my God, it was him, his cologne, his fragrance, and a first-hand revelation of the power of a scent to evoke memories. There they were, our guitar sessions and our dinner excursions. There they were, our recording sessions and the dozens of friends he'd similarly moved through his recording studio. There was his unquenchable yearning for girlfriend Belinda and the incessant pain of their breakup. There was the story of his wife's prolonged cancer death and the slow-motion death of his daughter Amy after her accelerating mental deterioration. And there was the emergency room, and the hospital ward, and the oxygen tubes, and the pressure masks. And there was the final text to Jill from the hospital. I'm dying, just get in here. I don't care what the rules are. And then hospice, and his daughter Jill and son Alan holding his hand when he died. My final memory is strange. We're at my old wine bar gig. It's a cool night on the patio, and the people are sitting around the flaming fire pit. It feels deep, like that final scene from Hospice, with Jill and Alan holding their father's hand. But Jill and Alan are with me, watching from outside the circle. The fire lights up Al's smile as he plays and sings. He's there serenading his young wife, Roseanne. His daughter Amy is there. Then I see that Jill and Alan are also there, inside the circle. And there's a place for me.
When the years have done irreparable harm, I can see us walking slowly arm in arm, just like that couple on the corner do. 'Cause girl, I will always be in love with you. When I look in your eyes, I still see that spot, until the shadows fall, until the room grows dark. Then when I leave this earth, I'll be with the angels standing. I'll be out there waiting for my true companion, just for my true companion, true companion, true companion.